there you go, a few prizes given away before we even got going, and encourage you to log in early next module next week when we're back into it, because we'll give out more prizes before it even begins. So thank you. Well, it's only thank you to Chris so far, who's the only one who submitted the assignment. It's not due quite yet, but that came in, and I found it highly entertaining and very very good. I laughed out loud on a couple of points, and good technical information, correct information in there as well. So, really good stuff. Thank you for that. And others, yeah, we're looking forward to seeing your little fact sheets or videos or cartoons or, I don't know, TikToks. Can you do it? I don't know. I don't know.
We should mention too that once we've got everyone's in, we'll create a folder in Schoology and share them with everyone else. So make sure whatever you submit, you're happy to have share with the rest of the group. And then that way everyone can have a look at one another's creations and learn from each other as well.
Yeah, I think that's a nice idea. So yeah, please work on that and get in contact if you're struggling at all, as we talked about, and with you know, anything we're doing through these modules. If you've got any questions or want to have an offline chat about any of the content, please get in contact. Right, so this session is all about, I suppose, a little bit more on the steps of an audit. So some of the process stuff, and then we delve into the specific road users, and we do a little bit of a look at some of the needs of road users, being pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, heavy vehicles, and of course passenger vehicles, which we've sort of been ticking along talking about throughout. But that's sort of the process that's set down for a road safety audit course, is to ensure that auditors switch the light bulb on in their mind for every road user. And of course, though, we won't have time to go into all the safety issues with particular road users, but you'll get a bit of an indication. So you've got me this module, and then the next module is some guest speakers, Jamie Robinson for the technical end of detailed design side of things, and who else have we got?
We've got Tony Bull for temporary traffic management.
Perfect. Tony Bull, nobody better, I think, to do that one. So that'll be next week. But this one, I'm going to pop some slides up. Of course, like usual, put things into the chat as I go, and Kathy will feed those along to me. I'll be asking you some questions and giving away a few prizes on a couple of things, as I like to do, but certainly asking for your input and through the chat. But of course, if you did want to speak, you just pop your hand up, the raise hand button, and Kathy will then be able to activate your the ability for you to speak, and we can have a bit of a chat about things. The session's been recorded, but we can't see you, and even if you put your hand up and we unmute you, still doesn't. I'm not going to turn your camera on. It can't do that. So it's okay if you're still in your pajamas. All right. Anything else to cover, Kathy, or I'll jump into some slides? All right. Now, do just make sure, Kathy, when I pop this up on the screen, that I'm showing. Hopefully, you're seeing the correct one, not the other view.
Yep. Yeah, good to go.
Awesome. Okay, so we talked about last week these different types of road safety audit: the feasibility, the preliminary design, the detailed design road safety audit, the road works, the pre-opening, post-opening, and the existing conditions, and then these thematic road safety audits. So those are I mean, they're stages of a project, aren't they? And you do an audit at that particular stage. The actual audit itself follows 8 steps regardless of which stage you're doing. And I'm going to take you through those those today. So if you're asked to do a feasibility design road safety audit, you follow the same 8 steps as a roadworks road safety audit or a post-opening road safety audit. So I want to go through and define these 8 steps of the road safety audit process with you. And then I want you to be able to find that information if you want to follow it up further and look into a bit more detail. So the process is relatively straightforward, and hopefully you'll find it straightforward as well. There are these 8 main steps in a road safety audit. The audit process does take time. It's not a very quick process, and there are certain steps that you really just have to go through. It certainly adds value to a project. We talked about that last module about some of the benefits in terms like a benefit cost ratio is big, but you get great value. And I think there is a wider spin-off benefit that we've had for many years with road safety auditing, which is this continual feedback to designers and project managers on a best practice road safety thinking. So it's almost been an education tool as much as it's been an actual individual project modification of infrastructure tool. And certainly I've always seen this wonderful thing when I am working and doing road safety audits for a project manager or a designer or a team, and you do multiple audits, and then you notice the later designs that are coming in for different projects have incorporated that thinking from those previous audits. So you're already going, okay, they're already now integrating this into their run-of-the-mill practice. So that's pretty exciting. And we really feel that it should be an integral part of any design process in terms of designing the road environment. We should have that audit for anything that's altering the road network. Now, just to keep you thinking, here's a nice directional sign, obviously in Victoria with some of those town names. It all looks like everything's about right there, but first one who writes into the chat something that they believe is not quite right about that sign will win a prize. But I'm going to keep moving on, so I'll leave you some time to do that. We'll come back to this one. Of course, remember to count your wallies throughout the session, and it'll be a quiz question as long as Schoology's back up and running by then. This diagram is out of the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6A. It sets out these 8 main steps in a road safety audit at any stage. And those are the selection of the audit team. This is done, and so you'll see here the column is the responsibility. Who's responsible for doing this? Well, the client, the designer, the project sponsor, you might call it. They select the audit team, and it's usually done by selecting, either the individual that you want leading that team or the, consultancy or the group, and then it's sort of pieced together. Provide the background information, so that it's got to be handed over all that information. Then there's usually some sort of commencement meeting style thing that happens, and it varies. If it's a very large project, sometimes it's a sit down or look around, stand around the role plot and really talk through all elements of it. Sometimes if you're auditing for a design group or a team that you do a lot for, and the project or the like, it can be sort of a phone call or the like. Then the documents are looked at, and there's a site inspection, and that's the audit team that gets out there and then look at the documents and keep looking at the site. The audit report is written up. There's some sort of completion meeting, which again is often just a phone call or the like. And then the client or the design team or the project manager writes some responses to that, to the audit and those things that have been identified and recommendations that have been made, and then any changes are implemented. The responses aren't necessarily back to the auditor themselves. That would be nice, but it's not a specific requirement. So what I'm going to do is just touch on these in a little bit more detail for each of those steps. The audit team, the information, the commencement meeting, the documentation and assessing and site inspections, the reporting, and the completion meeting, and the response, including implementation. So the first thing is that selection of an audit team. And you notice there I am saying team. Audits are almost always done in teams. The little bit of the Austrades guide that gives a little bit of possibility of a one-person audit being done, but that's very rare. And most jurisdictions are fairly firm that it should be a team that does the audit. And the team is to be led by a senior road safety auditor. And each jurisdiction has slightly different requirements on what would a senior road safety auditor be. Module 6, I will take you through where we're at in the requirements for the different jurisdictions around Australia and New Zealand. But everybody's very much in that space that the senior auditor should be leading the team. And then road safety auditors who are continuing their learning and development can make up other members of that team. And then there are others that could be part of the sort of team, but if they haven't met the requirements of becoming a road safety auditor, which for most jurisdictions is some sort of recognised course like this one or others, and then some requirements in terms of your work history and the like, or just that you're in the industry. I'll take you again through that in module 6 to show you exactly how you do that. But having seen all of your little introduction videos and commentary and knowing where you work and what your titles are, so successfully getting through this course, getting those pass marks, the 80% plus marks on the assignments and the like, you will be eligible to submit the certificate and just a brief explanation of your work, the work you're in. You will all qualify for the Victorian Register of Road Safety Auditors at least. So technically the client's responsible for appointing the audit team and could specify the individuals within that. As mentioned, it's often practical that it's just a consultancy or the like, and they sort of piece it together with appropriately qualified individuals. So everybody should ideally have a good understanding of what a road safety audit is. And I do encourage, if you've been asked to do a road safety audit and you're worried that they're not sure actually what they're asking you to do, that you have spend a bit of time with them explaining what a road safety audit is. I've certainly found a number of those situations occur where they think they're getting a DDA compliance audit. They think they're getting a design check against standards and that is it, or something like that. And so just guiding and explaining exactly what is going to come of this. So I just have a couple of tips in here. Always ensure the team's used. Almost never use a one-person audit team. As I say, there's these little get-out clauses in the Austrades guide. You'd need to check your jurisdictional requirements and the client requirements, but they do talk about small projects, low-volume roads, low-speed roads, and the like. The reason you like a team is that you get varied perspectives on the issues. You get people with different backgrounds, so they'll see things and pick things up differently. You can complement your areas of expertise with areas of expertise you may not have. You might be a detailed designer and understand that really well, but maybe you get somebody who has a more strategic network planning perspective, and you can pull together a really nice team. Also, site visits, a lot of the time it's a lot safer to have a second person, maybe a spotter, and maybe you're out in remote areas or the like, and so it's good to have a second person with you. Ensure that everybody is independent. I talked about this last module, and I'm sure I'll say it again. That independence is so important to road safety auditing. That you are not the designer, you're not the project manager, you're not somehow involved in that project. And only the senior auditor should lead the audit team. Ideally, that audit team has this broad mix of road safety experience, mixture of professions, ages, males, females. This nice rounded team would be wonderful. I popped this picture up. This was an audit team we put together on a thematic audit, which was a motorcycle road safety audit, and I'll explain sort of the details of that in a later module. But you'll see here's my audit team originally, which was a couple of my colleagues there, the three of us. That was the audit team, and we thought, yeah, we're all male, we're all about the same age, we've all come from a technical engineering, road traffic engineering, road safety engineering background. We're not getting much diversity here. And so we asked Wendy to come along, who is not a technical expert, and she's a rider, so that was our rider perspective, and female perspective, scooter riders are very different. She's from an education background as well. So we got a varied input there. Now, the practical realities of this is it's hard to do this often, to get a big team like this together and all these mixes. And it's often just a sort of two-person team as such, but have a think about it if you can. So you assess the documentation, and I do spend a lot of time looking at the designs with colleagues before going out to the site. Some people like to get out to the site early and then spend some time with the designs. I like to try and get my understanding of it. I do street view it up a bit at the design, looking at the design at street view and things like that. But then I get out there and really look at it, look at the site during the day and at night. And I really encourage people to calmly spend a bit of time there. Don't just try and run in and quickly have a look, snap photos, get out of there. Stand back, observe how people are using the area, give it a bit of time, see how it operates, observe desire lines where pedestrians are walking or want to be walking, anything else. If you can get there at times where it might be operating differently, so during peak hour, during school, drop-off, pickup, these are good things. And we do like to see that daytime and nighttime inspection undertaken. Now, the nighttime inspection, you might pick up a number of different things. Here's just an old example of an area during the day, and you can see it's quite clear, where North Croydon is and the like. And then at night, the retroreflectivity of that one's disappeared. So it's that's the kind of thing you might pick up at night. You might pick up other issues with street lighting, providing some visual deceit. Maybe the lighting draws you one way. Done nighttime inspections where headlight glare in certain angles of roads connecting have sort of appeared, and if you'll get blinded by these. You may discover in some scenarios that road use significantly changes. Maybe there's nightclubs or things that you weren't aware of that generate a whole lot of pedestrian activity or these sorts of things. So trying to see all these different times is very valuable. The nighttime inspection is a requirement under the Austroads guide. There is again a little bit of a slight get out of the nighttime inspection, but that is really the client's choice. As a road safety auditor, your default is to follow the Austroads guide, which says you should be doing a nighttime inspection. And if the client deems it unnecessary, then and they actually specify that, you then can not do the nighttime, but I would really encourage that you very clearly in your report state that at the client's request, a nighttime inspection was not undertaken. Now, sometimes the client said, don't worry about the nighttime inspection. They're trying to save a few dollars here and there. And I just do it anyway, because, you know, in the scheme of things, you can just hang around out there. The usual way we do audits and with the team is to go out there in the afternoon and have a look at it, then go to the local McDonald's or something like that, or a cafe or something, and start to sort of write up some of our thoughts and the like, and spend a bit of time doing that, discussing it. By the time it's got dark, and then you can go out and do the nighttime inspection. And then you might come back at another point if you want to see some of those different things. So the additional stuff for a nighttime, in a lot of cases, isn't that much. Sometimes it can be a little bit challenging. It's sometimes a bit weird in your feasibility audits to be standing in a paddock whether, you know, they're doing planning a brand new road, and it's summer, and so it's sort of 9:30 at night before it gets dark, and you're waiting away and thinking, is this adding value? But you might pick something up. And I would say probably 1 in 10 night times I'll pick up something that I hadn't picked up in the daytime. But sometimes that can be really a valuable thing to find. Yeah, Kathy, did anybody put in any concerns they had with this directional sign?
Yes, we had some responses, but I think Andrew's got it. With the broken part of the circle should be to the right of the bottom leg, not to the left, because turning right into the circulation is not an option.
Right, so prize for Andrew, a good keen eye there onto a directional sign. So the first question I have for the rest of you is there a break in these signs? Is that common for roundabouts? And you've probably driven past thousands of these in your life and maybe never even taken any notice of that little gap. But it certainly is, there is a gap, and Andrew's hit the nail on the head. It's a subtle clue as to which direction we drive around the roundabout. Some jurisdictions have slightly different sign designs. This is a very Victorian sign design, but most around the world have that. So this is the incorrect positioning of it. It should look like that for you know, a sign. That's a much better one in terms of that guiding you to go around the roundabout that way. Now, the question I have around this, apart from having it as a fun one to give away a prize and something that you might go, wow, I'm going to look at this at the next roundabout sign I pass, is that what, if any, risk does this pose to the travelling public? And in what scenarios as an auditor would you maybe rate this a little bit higher or lower? So does anybody have any comments around that? I mean, is this going to be the major source of death and serious injury on our road network? Well,
just got a comment from our South Australian guest, Adrian, says there's no break in roundabout signs in South Australia.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I'd question that. I admit I don't spend a huge amount of time in South Australia, but let's have a look at that. Somebody in the background, please jump onto Street View and go and look at a few roundabouts in South Australia.
No, don't do that. Concentrate on this session.
Oh, yeah.
Adrian says that they show lane direction.
Correct. They do, but I think that, anyway, we'll have a look at it. But certainly a lot of jurisdictions do this. But we've gone slightly off on a tangent, which is not the particular purpose of putting this up to say it's, you know, the most critical road safety issue we've got out there. And by no means is it. I mean, if you had that wrong, it would probably not result in death or serious injury for a very, very long time, or any major incidents. But what I'm trying to discover is, where do you think it might be a little bit worse than other places? Yes, so we've established why, but I'm talking about which sort of scenarios, what part of the road network may this be a little bit higher risk than other parts of the road network? Pop it into the chat if you've got any thoughts. Might have to keep moving on. So I'm not particularly talking about speed, but speed is that overarching thing that increases risk. So anything, any issues at higher speed increases the risk. No, but what I'm sort of trying to draw you down the path of is the areas with tourists or people unfamiliar with, a higher percentage of people unfamiliar with the that bit of road. And the next, I suppose, example that I've got there is the same issue, which I would consider a very minor issue. I mean, I'd point it out and it'd get changed in a design. There's no worry about that. But this is the exit from Hobart Airport. And this to me is, so this is the first roundabout you arrive at after you've got your rental car from Hobart Airport. And I just think that this probably elevates the risk a little bit, because you've got maybe American tourists who have arrived and gone and got their hire car, and well, first of all, they're driving on the wrong side of the road, and second of all, they've never seen a roundabout in their life, and they want to be, and just a few little factors like that might make you go, well, this is a little bit higher risk. And so for the purposes of what we're trying to get across in terms of this training, it's about thinking about who's using the road, how they're using it, what's the context of it, to help you to calibrate whether this is a higher risk or a lower risk item. As I've said, the lucky things about little like sign things like this is, if you see it in the design stage at least, and even at this stage, it's going to get changed. So you're good. So I pointed that one out to the lovely people of Tasmania as I arrived to do a road safety audit course, but not before taking the photo to add to my collection of photos to use. And so that one's been recently changed. So the next step is to write the audit report. And there is a sort of bit of a convention of what would go in a road safety audit report, and you can get different reports from other people in industry and have a look at how they do it. But generally, what we'll be expecting is a description of the project and the stage of audit that's being undertaken. So a detailed design audit or the like. The list of information that was provided to the audit team. And I'm very particular about ensuring that you put in there the plan number, the date of it, and the like. The reason for this is that I have been involved in different legal proceedings, coroner's investigations, and the like with audit reports where luckily, it was very clear in the audit report, so my or our team's report, but also with some others that I've been involved in, that they had clearly put the design that they had looked at and often had that in their files that we could look at. And the reason is that you do an audit at one point in time on this project, and alterations can be made down the track, and so if what is finally built didn't resemble what was audited, the auditor can't really be held to account for too much of that because that's not what was being audited. And certainly, I've done audits on designs and made recommendations, and then a couple of years later, driven through or rode my bike through these areas and gone, I wasn't anywhere near what I audited or anything that I recommended. So they must have gone completely off track, and either they got another audit done by another team, or they just said, well, we've done a road safety audit, but it'd be good for them to redo the audit if they've had significant changes. A list of the team members goes in there, dates the audit was carried out, and a lot of people like to put the weather conditions when they were on site. A logically arranged list of safety issues and their risk rating and the like. And so there's a sort of typical table of contents you might see. Photos, I encourage photos and snips of the design in the table of findings, but also in an appendix. And the other thing is that you actually, at the end here, you sign the audit report. It is an official document. You sign it, you date it, and it's put forward there. The completion meeting is held, and there's discussion about that, and there's clarification around your findings or recommendations. I do give the opportunity for a project team or a designer to have commentary on a first issue or the like. It's not for the purposes of debating the merits of the finding or the risk rating. But I do, if they have a concern about that, welcome any research or evidence or the like that they may be aware of that I may not be aware of on that particular issue. But it's more for clarity, and if they need more information or they think something's unclear, to rework that. Responding to the report. So again, the client then gets this report, and it's up to them to respond and keep records of what they're going to do and not going to do, and why they're not going to do things or they are going to do things. The auditor's responsibility ends after they hand that final report over. It is not the road safety auditor's responsibility to check that these have been built in accordance with what was planned, or that all those issues have been followed up and responded. The client team may decide to get you involved in some of that, but handing over your report, it's over to the designer, the project manager, the road authority to run with that. And then we want to see those implemented. And if there's no intention of ever changing anything after doing a road safety audit, so the audit is some sort of tick box exercise, there's no point doing it. It's a waste of resources, and the purpose is not to add extra useless red tape to infrastructure projects. It's to add value in terms of road safety improvements and identification. So that's important. Keep file copies, the second dot point there. So as an auditor, keep file copies. You never know when you'll be asked to appear in court to talk to your audit report, or dragged into the coroner's court or the like. It happens. It's not regular, but it certainly does happen. And that responding and acceptance or rejection of findings is so critical, and organisations need to have a process and procedure in place for that. I know some jurisdictions, Queensland certainly, had sort of centralised databases in the past. I think the administrative burden of that has been challenging, and I know Victoria has had regional databases of issues and the like. But having audit reports unread or unactioned sitting in drawers or in project files is a high risk scenario. Responding to the audit report. So the project manager receives that audit report, and as a project manager, a couple of things to remember. It could become a public document, so you want to think about the wording you use to any responses that you put on your file. It's great to respond to the audit team. We love that as auditors, to get a response, how people have reacted and altered things. But that's it's good practice to do that, but you don't have to. And a common misunderstanding is that whatever the road safety auditor says must happen. Okay, that's not the case. This is the auditor providing advice, and it is the project manager. It is their responsibility to decide what is done or what is not done. Okay, it's their project. They have the full picture of this project. The thing is, though, if you're a project manager and you're saying, I disagree with that finding, or I am not going to, do that recommendation, I'm going to do something else, you want to justify that and back it up with some sound commentary. You are well within your right to reject and say, I disagree with that finding, and here's the evidence as to why. Absolutely fine. Also to say, we cannot do that recommendation, however, we can reduce risk using this other thing, and that's also very acceptable. It is a piece of advice handed over. There's no legislative power of a road safety auditor. They are an advice giver.
Ken, is there a time frame for holding on to the files?
I don't particularly know. I briefly touch on some of the legal aspects of road safety auditing, but I do always say that you should consult a legal professional if you to make sure everything's in order there. And certainly if you're in a road authority, a state road authority, you're going to have access to some good legal counsel within the road authority, and you could talk to them about that. If you're in a local government, you probably also got access to some legal advice, or in private industry, you can engage with some legal experts in the area. I don't know. I just keep mine. I mean, how hard is it to electronically have a copy of things for a long time? Okay. Any other questions or comments arise there?
Not at this stage.
Awesome. Thank you. Just gonna go. Okay, we're on to pedestrians. So, oh, Kathy, are you seeing my screen? No.
No. Yes.
Pedestrians?
Yes, good.
Excellent. Okay, so what I've done in that first module and now this one is to sort of try to get you in the frame of mind of knowing what a road safety audit is. And so you've got your head around that a bit. You've got a bit of information about how to write up a road safety audit report. Remember, I split up that formula of issue, risk, the crash that could happen, things that influence risk, any standards and guidelines, and I want you to follow that, and there's the table. Kathy, as I'm saying this, I'm just wondering, is at the end of this module, is there an assignment, or is that at the end of next module?
End of next module.
Okay. So what we do at the end of next module is actually get you to do a little desktop practice on writing up an audit finding or two, where you have to identify the issues first in the plans, and then you get a bit of practice. So it's sort of stepping you into the actual full-blown audit process, which you'll do later down the track in this course. What we want to do now is delve into these individual road users and some of the issues for them. And I'm going to start with pedestrians, the biggest road user, in fact. And most people are pedestrians at some point in time. In fact, I dare say everybody is a pedestrian at some point in time, apart from some very rare exceptions potentially. By the end of this module, we want to identify requirements of pedestrians for safe travel, source some technical information regarding infrastructure and pedestrian safety, identify common road safety audit issues for pedestrians, and understand some of the terminology around pedestrian treatments and facilities. The 4 groups of pedestrians at the greatest risk: the elderly, the young, the disabled, and the intoxicated. And we know from a pure sort of a numbers perspective, in terms of the quantum of people killed and seriously injured, our intoxicated pedestrians are ahead in that. There's quite a large amount of intoxicated pedestrian fatality and serious injury across Australia and New Zealand. And we can, in a road safety audit, play a role in that, which is not about us trying to stop people getting intoxicated. And that would, that's other areas of our big safe system that might be working on those sorts of things. But our role in that sort of space is to minimise the chance that a crash actually occurs with somebody in this state, or when it does, that the severity of that crash is much lower. There's quite low numbers of disabled people involved in crashes that result in death or serious injury. However, there are obviously much greater challenges in utilising the infrastructure in place, and it's something important for us to be looking at. The young obviously have less cognitive abilities, and we see some erratic behaviour. Actually not that discommon to the intoxicated in terms of some of the behavioural mechanics of it. And the elderly also have some different challenges in perception, and again, high cognitive loads can be very confusing and challenging for the elderly. So, lots of multiple signs of things to do, complex intersections. These are all very difficult things for the elderly to comprehend and take appropriate action. Certainly even little bits like turning across multiple lanes of traffic is an extremely hard task for elderly. There's a really good Austroads report that delves into the specific risks of the elderly in road use and road safety issues, and I can try to dig that out if anybody has a particular interest. We certainly have good information around young road users and around schools and the like. Disabled has taken a great leap over past times with the introduction of Disability Discrimination Act and various other types of legislation in different jurisdictions. And the intoxicated, we still have this slight issue in some of the community trying to blame and say, well, they shouldn't be intoxicated, they shouldn't have wandered onto the road, it's their fault. And that sort of thinking and way of going about this is not helpful. It is about trying to change the system so that doesn't result in death and serious injury. So we'll keep working on that last one, I think, which, as I mentioned, was the biggest source of trauma. And there are really three basic categories you can use for pedestrian safety: the segregation, the separation, and the integration. It's very sort of basic term stuff, but segregation is basically you say this is not an area for pedestrians, for example, a freeway or the like. Or you say this is not an area for cars. This is a pedestrian-only area. And then you've got your separation. It can be separation in time. So the same bit of road may be used at different times for vehicles and for pedestrians. So, obvious stuff like a pedestrian crossing, well, that'll be cars in a little bit of time, won't it? And school crossings and the like also fit into that category, which are, the separation in time. We see different configurations of crossing. We see scramble crossings or scatter crossings, or I'll give a prize for the person who can tell me the other name for those crossings where you can cross in multiple directions. It has a particular a name in the traffic engineering space, which I always find a nice, funny little name to remember, but you've got to have your traffic engineering trivia amongst you. And Chris has got that with Barnes dance, correct? It's called a Barnes dance if you can do all that. But yeah, commonly known as a scatter crossing or a scramble crossing as well. But again, we're just all in this sort of separation. The separation in space are things like our pedestrian refuge islands, footpaths or the like. So we're separating in space those vehicles. And separation of providing this separation in space with a pedestrian refuge. Again, now we're starting to find some things that as auditors we might be thinking about and picking up. You've got designs maybe of pedestrian refuge with storage areas for pedestrians. A common issue that you find is there's not enough storage for the pedestrians. I mean, just a crossing point like this and a pedestrian refuge in the middle, my rule of thumb is if you've got a father or a mother pushing a pram, don't make them choose whether their child or themselves has to stand in live traffic. Is a pretty easy rule of thumb, but there are some documented standards and guidelines around those distances. Other people like to say, if you're riding a bike, you shouldn't have to be having a wheel into life. But again, as auditors, you may refer back to the standards and guidelines to check that. But if you have a concern, well, you put it in there. And especially some of these meet standards and guidelines, but you get out there and you realize the sheer number of pedestrians trying to cross can't fit in those spaces, and they're spilling over and they're having to stand up on the, they would be having to stand up on the pedestrian refuge and no doubt be spilling into traffic. And we also include in our pedestrians, people on mobility scooters, on e-scooters, on skateboards. So pedestrians is quite a very broad category there. Lots of things to consider, and you'd want to be thinking about all of those as you go. The use of these sort of pedestrian overpass facilities provides that separation, obviously, but I do encourage you or stress as a road safety auditor, you need to be thinking about genuinely how's this going to be used. In theory, all the pedestrians should go up and go over and come down, and we have a wonderfully safe scenario. The practice is that we know that the desire line is here over to here, and I use that term a bit, desire line, pedestrian desire line. It's basically the straight line between where they are and where they want to be. The pedestrians do not like going off their desire line. And then what you discover is that walk all the way up there and back and across and down there and down there and down there. Oh my gosh, that's all too much. I'm just going to cross straight across there. The intoxicated doing more. They're far more likely to just cross straight across there, adding to the risk and the like. So as a road safety auditor, if you were to be auditing a new pedestrian overpass facility like this, yes, you'd be looking at the barriers, the piers. Is that all looking good? Has it got the right is everything good there? But you need to be asking those questions. Are people actually going to be using this? And are all of them going to be using it? And are we leaving a lot of risk? And is there anything we do to encourage more use of it or make it harder to not use it, for example? And the final one in our 3 strategies for pedestrian safety is this integration. And this is where you are actively mixing vehicles and pedestrians. And the shared zone is a common way to do that. Certainly in a lot of jurisdictions, this is a legislative thing in the road rules, where a shared zone actually requires vehicles to give way to pedestrians throughout the whole zone. Done as a 10km/h shared zone or a 20km/h shared zone. In some jurisdictions have that 20km/h option also. So the shared zone is a great example of integration. And there's a little bit of general guidance on how to design a shared zone. And so if you are auditing an area and they're planning to make it a shared zone, does anybody want to have a little guess? Again, I'm giving out prizes willy-nilly here. First person to put in there, in a very short, concise way, what would the guidance say? What would be the objectives or the principles you'd be trying to achieve in the creation of a shared zone? Any commentary around that?
We've got less
vehicles a day greater than the pedestrian. So you're saying there's more pedestrian activity than vehicle activity? Yes and no on that one. I mean, that's generally, you've got to have pretty high pedestrian activity to have one of these. But what sort of principles would the infrastructure like to achieve? You're making choices on redesigning this area to make it a shared zone. Oh, okay, there it is. Chris has hit the nail on the head with exactly the words I wanted to see. Not looking like a road. That's pretty much the principle and guidance. Everything else others are saying is fairly good. But if you're creating a shared zone, like the best shared zones are ones where you drive through it and you go, am I even allowed to be driving here? You've had win. That's a good shared zone. Now, here's one which has some great elements to it and some things I think that could be improved a little bit. So we're seeing here's a shared zone in regional Victoria. And we see they've got the 10-kilometre. They've even put this give way to pedestrians, which is fine, but technically the road rules say with that sign, so you don't need that. But it's probably an indication not many road users know the road rules. And you can see there that they've removed curbing, so I like that. They've changed the colour of it, so it's not continuation of the dark asphalt colour. But they've then line marked it like a road, which I'm not too happy about. And I tend to, they've like marked an edge line and the like. So I like to see it disrupted, parking all in weird spots, textured surfaces, no line marking, and those are really great shared zones. So those who live in Victoria, we've got a wonderful, I think, example in the city of Bendigo. So go have a look at that one. You've got fountains popping up and you're like, oh my God, I really shouldn't be driving here. And you're going so slow because you're not sure you should actually be in there. And happily, yeah, share others if from other jurisdictions if you know of really good ones. But as an auditor, you're really saying, is this clear that it is a pedestrian priority area? Are the speeds going to be very low, and is there anything else that can be done around? Okay, let's drill into a little bit more of a few examples of road safety audit and some pedestrian issues. And I'm going to be asking you lots of questions again on some of the scenarios I put up. I've got some different scenarios and different case studies of tragic incidents, and again, I bring those up not because we're doing black spot investigations or detailed crash investigations, but so we can learn from some of the issues there and hopefully prevent them before they happen in other areas. So the first thing is this sight line to pedestrians. So can a vehicle driver have nice open sight lines to a pedestrian? And we know that things like the vegetation block sight lines, we can have rubbish bins, or we can have signal controller boxes or buildings. All these things can block that sight line. And so a vehicle approaching, especially where a pedestrian has that priority, we've got some big challenges. Now, this is a slip lane, obviously, and it's got a pedestrian crossing on it. This has been the topic of a lot of interest in our industry of late, and a lot of debate out there on the appropriate treatments for pedestrians on slip lanes. Now, we put out a safe system snippet, which is things that we put out quite a bit on the topic, and with our take on it based on some New Zealand research that had been done, acknowledging that there's been some other research that's been done, and we certainly got a lot of commentary back on that. Some people very unhappy with different aspects of it, and I think it's an area we need to continue to get some more research around. But the issue, I suppose, starts to be generated because as you approach here as a driver, where are you looking? Well, you're looking to your right, aren't you? Because you want to see if you can put the foot down and beat the traffic. Now, the pedestrian is coming across and they have priority. So they are sort of walking out there, chest out, I've got priority, this is my zebra crossing or pedestrian crossing. And so we've got the driver looking the wrong way, the pedestrian confident going through there, and we get this fairly nasty mix with these sort of setups. Add in these sightline deficiencies, and we're starting to get fairly nasty mix there. I'm going to, I suppose, ask our Queensland counterparts if anybody knows there. I've heard that Queensland set in place a policy on this, and I'm interested, is it that everything must be raised, which is my preference, as in you must have a raised crossing point. I'd be very keen if anybody knows that one. But certainly, as a road safety auditor, you're identifying that issue, and you may just recommend that it gets raised, it gets signalised, or there's alterations associated with that. But you can see the issue, you can see how it can arise, and that's our job. That's our job in that one. Yes, so thanks, Andrew. You do have a road safety audit policy, and the specifics around the slip lane and how that's all configured is what I was looking for, but we can come back to that at a later point. The other thing to think about, one that often pops up when you're road safety auditing, is to have a look at that swept path diagram. Now, Jamie's going to go into a lot more detail about swept path diagrams and vehicles tracking and the like in the next module. But if pedestrians are gathering and storing in an area where if a vehicle tries to turn, it has to sort of sweep over that area, obviously this is a big concern for us as road safety auditors. We also want to think about where we're forcing pedestrians to walk. And this might look like a fine, okay place to walk. They've got some space there. But you've got to imagine it during winter and it's muddy, and maybe it's forcing pedestrians to walk on the road. And that's going to certainly be increasing the risk. So even recommendations around providing those facilities for pedestrians. So here we go. Another, oh, yeah. There's our gap, right, correct spot, another Victorian example. So even this one, I mean, this is the main sort of pedestrian connector between Warragul and the hospital precinct and the like. And the pedestrians going along there are really walking in the grass. Now, if it was very muddy and rainy and the like, and they may end up sort of walking along the shoulder there, which is not going to be a great thing at all. And I want you to think about that pedestrian desire line. I love this photo because it just says it very very clearly. Look, pedestrian fencing has been put up to try to corral pedestrians to use this in there to get to the station. But her desire line is across there, and she'll walk on the road rather than actually walk to there and back. And that's the nature of pedestrian desire line. And I have a particular dislike for pedestrian fencing in most cases. Occasionally, I'm okay with pedestrian fencing. The reason I have this particular dislike for pedestrian fencing is because of this. We will actually see people walking along the road, and it has trapped people on the road rather than corralling them to the areas that we want. So I really encourage you as auditors to think, this is where I am, this is where I want to go, or this is where they are and they want to go. And what are they actually going to do? I know we've tried to tell them to go across here and the like, but. And here's a little one that was circulating online, and I think the user experience is really the desire line, isn't it? And if you have this, obviously that's where they want to go, and that's where they will go. despite what you've told them in the design. So as an auditor, you need to be that realist. You need to be able to go back and say, I know what you've designed and well done. Unfortunately, I don't believe the road users are going to use it that way. They're going to use it this way. And let's, try to alter that in the design phase in your road safety audit. This was me taking a group out to look at some cyclists at roundabout and even just seeing the pedestrian desire lines cut through these areas with no pedestrian facilities and maybe not the best place to cross. And we know that on a bigger picture strategic planning perspective, if pedestrians are in one area and they want to get to the other, they will. Okay, and you can, try to build them out of it, but it's very challenging. Building their facilities so they can permeate across these areas is the way to go. Obviously, this one from another country, but certainly we see that in quite a number of locations. This next example is an incident investigation that was done of a pedestrian crash, and this is what you see as a driver. Now, the next photo is taken just behind this hazard marker, okay, just standing behind that. That's that hazard marker. So that's what the pedestrians are seeing. And you'll see here that the driver is approaching and we've got the pedestrians happily crossing. Now, this audience is probably very aware and astute that the pedestrians do not have right of way in this scenario because it's not a correctly marked pedestrian crossing and it's not marked as a shared zone. And so the vehicle has priority. But it's a bit confusing for the run-of-the-mill pedestrian who doesn't, have that in-depth knowledge of the specific markings required and the signs required. It just looks like they should cross there. And it only takes, 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million to think that they have priority and confidently walk out, and the driver to think they have priority and drive through at whatever speed they're going for us to have an incident. And so the clarity of priority is what I really want you to be considering in any of these pedestrian improvement projects or any of these sorts of projects. Is it very clear to everybody who has priority? We see people trying to do things or like these yellow markings. Now, this is sort of a hybrid half. This is where pedestrians should be going and watch out for them. I don't particularly like these sets up and it makes me a little bit concerned. The whole road rules around right turns and left turns into intersections and pedestrians is a minefield. I mean, technically, at least in Victoria under the road rules, a left-turning vehicle has to give way to a pedestrian, a right-turning vehicle has to give way to a pedestrian, but a vehicle exiting has priority over any pedestrian. So, minefield there. But what I'd like to see, is the just adoption of, okay, we're going to go with pedestrian priority. It is pedestrian priority and do a nice raised pedestrian crossing or the like in these locations. There's some traffic operations challenges to work through, but at least it's clear from that perspective. This is an interesting one in terms of a gateway style treatment and to slow in that threshold for vehicles so they're not doing, coming around here very fast and the like and trying to create that. And there's aspects to that I really like. The challenge, I think, with this one is that the project team were worried about pedestrians thinking that this was a pedestrian crossing, a zebra crossing as such. And so they decided to use yellow markings to try to differentiate that clearly for the pedestrians to say, no, this is not a pedestrian crossing. You don't have priority through all of this. I again would question whether our, run-of-the-mill pedestrians are that astute in understanding the difference between a yellow and a white and these sorts of things. So I think there's some redesigns of these sorts of things that could eliminate some of that confusion. I mean, this one slightly draws you into thinking you've got priority. It's a different color. It's sort of line marked in this piano key pattern as you would, but that's similar lines, and there's a lot there to make you think that. And the continuation of the separator line doesn't continue through. Little subtle clues, but these are the human factors elements to sort of how a pedestrian perceives the environment and has these unconscious thoughts about the use of that infrastructure. This one I like a little bit better. Same principles. It's raised on both approaches, but it's elongated out. It looks like a road. It looks clearer that pedestrians might have to stop and give way. That might even be moved back a little bit more, and you can get even better. So these are little tweaks that you could make. Airports are just a goldmine for training fodder for a road safety audit course. I think it's something to do with the feds having jurisdiction over it, and then it's just, anyway. Here we go. Here's Launceston Airport, and this actually is a road, and if you analyze it a little bit, you finally work out that the vehicles have priority through here, and the taxis coming through here at a decent pace to get to their taxi rank much further down. But as a pedestrian walking out of there, and it's a little bit hard to see that. I like the fact that they've raised it at least, so that makes it fairly or lowers the risk significantly. But I think the marking of that as a pedestrian crossing wouldn't be the worst thing, and that would certainly be, as an auditor, something that I'd be pointing out to clear up that priority and ensure it's priority for pedestrians. Or vice versa, if they absolutely refuse to have pedestrian priority, well then you want to redesign it so it looks like a road and it's much clearer. Again, another example, looks pretty attractive for a pedestrian to just continue walking out there, doesn't it? But not pedestrian priority. So we really need to be clear on how we mark these with the pedestrian crossing symbols. Check your local jurisdictional guidance on exactly how you do it. But you also have to have the zebra crossing markings, the pedestrian crossing markings. So this one doesn't actually have that marking. This one does, and lots of pedestrian crossing signs there, maybe a little bit of chaos and clutter. And there's the sort of marking setup. Technically, on a slip lane, it's pedestrian priority throughout the whole slip lane in most jurisdictions, but nobody seems to know that, so it's marked, and we had a chat already about that, some of the challenges there. And I encourage you to read our fact sheet, but also read the other research snippet, because there's a lot of discussion about that out there. A lot of confusion on which signs to use. Completely incorrect use of a pedestrian crossing warning sign here. This is actually trying to direct pedestrians to use this area. So incorrect use there. And I love this one. I mean, it's a pedestrian crossing, and they've put the pedestrian crossing legs to try to tell the pedestrians this is where you cross, rather than pointing it at the vehicles. Probably lowish risk scenarios in these low speed environments on Hobart Pier here, but nonetheless, all the stuff we want to be picking up and pointing out as road safety auditors. Okay, here's a coastal town, and this is a recently installed pedestrian crossing facility. Now forget about the big lines throughout where they're trying to vitalize their town centre and making it more livable and the like. It is still a vehicle priority route, and these are pedestrian crossings, as I say, recently installed. But if you'd got in a design stage as a road safety auditor, what little things might you have picked up and potentially suggested a little bit of redesign work with this in mind? Forget really, I suppose, about the tree blocking a little bit of, oh, no, maybe you could, no, I've already said it now. So the tree here blocking that sign would be maybe something that you point out it's going to grow, but maintain it. But any other things in terms of the design of this infrastructure that could improve safety for our road users, just little tweaks on the design. So pop anything you can think of into the chat. Okay, wow, I'm seeing some really great stuff coming in here. First thing I'm liking to see, a lot of people would like to see that as a raised pedestrian crossing, and absolutely that would lower the speed and it would make it a much safer environment. The next one that people are bringing up, which is actually the one and the intention of me putting this up, was people talking about the location of the bins and the shrubs and the like. And so if we have vehicles approaching this way on the left-hand side of the road, and you have those little pedestrians, kids, shorter pedestrians walking out here, we've got this sight line obstruction, don't we? The bin there, the shrubs and the like. Simply a redesign to have that on the departure side, so pushing it a little bit up here, would have made this a much sort of safer, because there'd be clear view of that for any vehicle approaching. And once they're onto that, they're easier seen. Tiny little modification, no difference in cost, and that would be wonderful. I agree with the raising of it. That would be a really wonderful thing as well. Thank you for the input on that. Now, I'll give you a minute here to have a stretch if you want, to fill up a water. And we've got sort of 45 minutes or so to go. And I'm just going to have a sip of water myself and read back through a couple of comments just to make sure I've got everything. Okay. So thank you, Andrew, for the clarification on what Queensland is doing. So the encouragement of signalised slip lanes and by, I suppose, referring from that is that raised pedestrian crossing may not be permitted. That's a little bit unclear and a bit of debate. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Certainly raised pedestrian crossings are my preference and pretty much a go-to road safety audit finding recommendation for a slip lane that has pedestrian crossing. Okay. That's great commentary. Thank you for your input on that past example. This one I'm going to give you is now a fatality investigation that we were undertaking, but I think it's again these sort of things that we would hope in a road safety audit we could weed out before anybody loses their life or the like. Now this is the point at which the pedestrian stepped out and was struck by a vehicle from this direction. This is the pedestrian crossing, the signalised intersection. This is a service road. I'll just show you here the view from the service road. And so that last photo was taken at this location and the pedestrian stepping out there. This is the approach. We have a 70 km/h large arterial road, enters into the slip lane, and that's the the spot of the incident there. Now, what I have here is this concern about the non-continuation of the facility, if that makes sense. So when you're out there, and it's a bit hard to see from the photos, and again, another reason why a site visit is so valuable, auditing or doing any of these investigations. You've got the green man, you've got the green man, you've got the ticking of the light telling you can go, and you know it almost draws you to go. And there's no priority here, but it's all priority here. So you've got that discontinuation. And now we don't have CCTV footage or dash cam of the incident itself, but you know, I wonder and hypothesize that the pedestrian stepped out there, either you know concentrating on all of that they're right to go or the like. So that's the concern. And then the speed that vehicles were travelling in there. They really have a nice cut in, and they're going quite at high speed as they enter there. No sort of threshold or anything to slow vehicles upon entry. So 50 km/h service road, and I dare say they would be going at that 50 or higher as they enter in past this crossing point. So if you know we were to be able to be thinking about that when this was signalised or that service road was being built and trying to integrate that in early, that would be a really good advantage. A common misunderstanding, and I mentioned it earlier, that the Disability Discrimination Act, the DDA audit, is a road safety audit, or that a road safety audit incorporates all those Disability Discrimination Act requirements. Again, it may be slightly different in different jurisdictions as to what it's called, but it's to ensure that pedestrians with all types of abilities, including those in wheelchairs and others, can access buildings and move around in buildings and move around the road network and the like. And it has things like the tactile ground surface indicators and different requirements on grade ramps and handrail heights and all of this sort of stuff. And that's well beyond what a road safety audit does. We don't go and we're not checking into all of that stuff. And so I do encourage you, when you're out there and you're being a road safety auditor, to be clear with your clients that it's not going to be a DDA compliance audit. And that's a separate exercise. Now, as an auditor, if I see there's a DDA issue, I will often put that into the audit report just because I've noticed it. I sometimes don't even risk rate it. If I go, is this actually genuinely going to result in death and serious injury for anybody in the next 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, if they build it exactly the way that I go, no, but it's not right. I'll pop it in there, but I may just have it as a to note, or I might have it as an appendix and just say, by the way, just notice this while we're out there and this, but you know, that you should have a DDA compliance check done, or have a look into that stuff yourself. There might be scenarios where I actually have it in as a low risk or a medium risk or something like that, or even a high risk, depending on the scenario, the road users, and how it's all been configured. I have in some reports put in there concerns about the DDA tactiles being a hazard to other pedestrians. I don't have particularly great answers for how that can be rectified in some of the scenarios, but slippery DDAs and tripping for high-heeled road users and the like, you know, that you might bring that up. So, you know, they will maybe respond and say, well, we have to do it for the legislative purposes, or maybe they'll find another way that it can be done in a better manner. We talked about the yellow marking as, you know, something that, you know, maybe it's a bit better in these scenarios just to highlight where the pedestrians would be going, but I don't think it's much road safety value in doing that. But happy to be proven wrong with any research. And we see things like the tactiles and contrasting. That's a classic one that pop in as a to note in the audit report where I go, well, your tactiles don't contrast the pavement, so they blend in with the pavement, because those are there also for people with you know, some form of visual impairment, but they can see some contrasting differences. Let's do a little quiz, shall we? A little exercise. So Kathy, I'll explain this and I'll put some numbers up and then we'll hit go on the poll, okay? Here is an intersection. And what I want you to do is tell me the location of the 3 serious injury and 2 other injury crashes involving pedestrians in the same crash type at the same location. I'm going to give you some multiple choice to make it easier. But you can see there it's a major arterial with some slip lanes. And here's the quiz time. Okay, you have got your options for where these crashes occurred. Option 1, vehicle turning in here and the pedestrian being struck walking across there. Option 2, the pedestrian walking across here and the vehicle turning onto the pedestrian there. Option 3, the pedestrian crossing from the island over to this part and being struck by the vehicle coming through here. Option 4, vehicle approaching this slip lane and the pedestrian crossing there. Or option 5, the pedestrian walking along the footpath and the vehicle turning in and striking the pedestrians. 3 serious injuries, 2 other injuries that we're aware of. And you get to have a vote. Remember, you're not marked on this, so this is just your idea and your vote. And for those who aren't, you know, trying to get their head around this, perhaps put yourselves in the driver's seat and imagine yourself driving along and what you'd be looking at and where you'd be looking. Put yourself in the pedestrian's shoes and what you're seeing and where you're walking. And let's keep having those guesses come in. I'll give you a minute to ponder it, to make your choices. How are we going here? Good few of you have had a good guess. See a few of you scratching your head and pondering and conjuring up different scenarios in your mind. And that's actually very much what a road safety auditor has to do. As a road safety auditor, you don't get the, you get this as a design, and so you don't have any crash history to work with, and you've got to try and be predicting these before they even happen. So quite a challenge sometimes, but you know, this helps us with that thinking. I'll give it just another minute, another 30 seconds for our last couple of people to have in there their crash predictions. Just have a guess for those still going. And remember, you're not getting marked on it, so don't be concerned. And I think I've got to move on now, Kathy. So thank you, and sharing the results there. So we've had most people go for location 2, and some people go for location 1 and 3. So Now, I picked each of these locations, or the ones that weren't the ones involved in the crash, because they have some elements of risk to them themselves. But the 7 of you who picked location 2, you are correct. Well done. I'm not sure exactly how many of you worked through that scenario in your head exactly as to how it worked. But the additional danger and risk associated with the configuration of this intersection for that location 2 is associated with this weird setup where the slip lane is on the right of the pedestrian crossing. Very weird. This is how it should usually set up. We talked a lot about the slip lane challenges from the different perspectives. So you've got there. But the way a pedestrian should be crossing is crossing into the little island and then across the road in that stage. You can see this one should be crossing from the island there to there. So the pedestrian should have gone to here, to there, to there. And that island really should have been further out. So this one's a little bit weird in that entry into the service road. And so I can definitely see why a few people picked 1, because that's odd. There weren't any crashes there, but it may be something as an audit that you would point out, because it's a little bit weird to have that. And why do they have that when they can sort of come out and go in, or maybe you're just identifying it as a risk as an auditor. I can see location 3 is quite high speed there. And again, the looking out there. So there's a fairly straight, long approach and the looking out. The pedestrian I put coming from this side in that one. So it'd be sort of somewhat more in view. Maybe if it that way, it'd be harder. Again, just a normal slip lane challenge in this one. And then turning over a pedestrian is a challenge. Often if there's multiple lanes and the drivers are making quick darting maneuvers, we see much worse outcomes for pedestrians. But those who picked that are absolutely were spot on. Now, the challenge I ask you, and what we'd be expecting of you as road safety auditors, is to pick that problem from the design so it's not ever built in the first place. Now, that could be a challenge for some of you. But the way I encourage you to do it is systematically work through each road user, traveling each direction, making each turn maneuver, and put yourself in the driver's seat, in the pedestrian's shoes, on the motorcycle. This is obviously all in your mind, and you can do that. So you would say, I'm approaching as a driver, I'm going through here. Would there be any issues? Can I see everything? Okay, I'm coming in here. Okay, I'm looking right. Oh, okay, I've turned right. Okay, there's a pedestrian there. And then, if it's an existing conditions audit, it's a lot easier, because you can actually go out and drive these and walk around it and see some of this. If you're looking at that as lines on a bit of paper, you've got to really put yourself in that imagination, forecasting, thinking these things through, and try to predict some of this. So it can be challenging, and another reason why teams are good. And the more experienced you are with auditing, the more you sort of think through these issues. So any questions or comments on that one at this stage, Kathy?
No, all good. Thank you, Ken.
Great. I think it's a fairly vivid example, and I use that one quite a bit. I mentioned this before, but if you're doing a road safety audit, you want to try to go there and have a look at it operating during different times. So obviously, if it's around a school drop-off, school pickup, it'd be good to see how it operates like this during these times. If it's some new infrastructure around the local footy ground or something like that, it would be ideal to have a look at it on game day and when there's a home game and these sorts of things. You may not be able to do that for practical reasons. I mean, you'd ideally want to look at when it's raining, so when it's wet, when it's dry, when it's winter, when it's summer. You know, obviously you can't do all of this in a road safety audit, but if you can easily within what you're doing, get that different perspective and view, it can be very valuable to you identifying risk of new infrastructure or existing infrastructure. You can also talk to people who know the operation of the area if you're not familiar with it. And I love getting out there as my audit team, and you know, you put on your high vis vest and you got your clipboard and the like, and you're standing around looking there. And of course, some of the residents come running out and demand to know what's being planned and built. I sort of say, oh, no, I'm just looking at the intersection, sort of hiding my clipboard with any plans or the like. But I often do just say, oh, what do you know about the intersection? Have you seen any incidents, or how does it get used? What are the problems? And gee, do they tell you a whole lot of history about the intersection, the area, the problems, the crashes that have happened, they're just a wealth of information of the problems. And so that can be very useful. Be careful, obviously, doing that. If you're working for a client, there's sensitivities or anything like that. You're not out there doing community consultation and the like. You're simply doing your job. But I just note that as a nice way to gather rich intel in a very quick manner if it's not an area you're very familiar with. And in terms of what we can do, it's some different pedestrian features and facilities. Well, there's a lot out there. We talked about raised pedestrian crossings being termed wombat crossings. Our poor New Zealanders have probably been using the term wombat crossing quite a bit, and they're probably scratching their heads as to what this wombat crossing is. Crazy Australians. It's a raised pedestrian crossing. Don't think New Zealand has a particular term for it, like a Kiwi crossing or the like, but it's a raised pedestrian crossing. But there are some technology things around pedestrian operated signals. So we have puffin crossings, which are pedestrian user-friendly intelligent crossings. It's a sort of acronym as such. And this is basically the technology when you walk up to a house at night and the lights automatically come on. Well, it's the same technology. It just keeps the signals red if there's movement on the crossing still. So it's helping for any slow pedestrians who might still be there. So that's a puffin crossing. So somebody at some point, some traffic engineer in the pedestrian crossing game decided to go in a bird theme, and they've stuck to it. And so we've got the puffin crossing. And that's another picture of a puffin crossing retrofit. We've got the toucan crossing, and the toucan being both for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's where we see the cyclist lane and providing the facilities for cyclists. And it's sort of toucan crossing. So again, yeah, not my bad joke. Some ancient traffic engineer who made up all these terms. We have pelican crossings. So this is pedestrian light controlled crossing. So as a driver, you see a red symbol and the pedestrian seeing green to cross, and then they will see it go to a red man, and you actually see then the flashing orange for a while. And that's again to just help for any last minute clearing of pedestrians. Then it goes to green, and then obviously orange and red again. Pedestrian light controlled crossing. Pegasus crossing. So these are crossings for horses in particular, and technically under most road rules, jurisdictions road rules, a horse is a vehicle, and so you do need this sort of specific entity. And of course, the rider can press the button there. And my random horse road safety trivia is that It's illegal to ride a horse when you're intoxicated because you are in control of a vehicle. However, it does appear to be perfectly legal to ride an intoxicated horse. I can hear you all laughing in your respective areas there. Anyway. Now, I've covered off a number of sort of different ideas around pedestrian safety. I've given you some things that we've commonly seen in doing road safety audits and pedestrian issues. I've shown you some incidents where we've had some serious injuries, and we've unpacked sort of how that comes about from the pedestrian the way the pedestrians use the facility, but also where vehicles are looking and those sorts of things, and that priority and confusion. I think some of you might be thinking, wow, what if I don't pick this up as an auditor? What if I miss something like this, something obvious, and it results in these deaths and serious injuries and these sorts of things? This is very scary. There's a lot to cover here. Well, Austroads has tried to help you out a little bit in this. And there's a few things that I hopefully can say which will calm you down a little bit and show that you can add value. First thing is that the Austroads guidelines have these things called checklists. Now, I'm currently working on the update to the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6, Road Safety Auditing. We're actually going to rename them from checklists to prompt lists. So, subtle change, but this is to remind you that this is not everything that you need to look at. It is not simply an exercise where you go tick, 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 and then you're done. No, you need to holistically look at it. It could be other things, but they prompt you on your thinking. And if you follow through these checklists or prompt lists, it will guide you in some thinking around pedestrian facilities, cyclists, motorcyclists, heavy vehicles, and a whole raft of other things. So it really starts to guide you along the journey. And as a new road safety auditor, I really encourage you to be using that checklist and going through each item for whatever your design is that you're looking at or existing bit of road. A lot of them you will go not applicable, because remember these checklists are trying to cover every road environment, every scenario. So you're going to say not applicable to a lot of them. But what it's done is it's forced you to think about that and look at your site and your design and go, okay, are there any drainage issues that might result in road safety? Are there any sightline issues for vehicles approaching pedestrian crossings? And you know, you just get taken through this big journey. So that's one thing to point out. The second thing I want to point out is that I keep talking about teams, and I keep talking about this graduation to senior auditor. So you're not going to be thrown in the deep end to lead an audit yourself straight away. You are going to be in a team. You'll be guided by a senior auditor who will help you along this thinking, and you will build up experience, and you'll get better at this, and you'll get better at picking up these issues and identifying those things. So you graduate up to that. So we're basically at the point for a final little quiz and then some questions and commentary from anybody that's got any questions. So Kathy, do you want to do the quiz first, or do you want to see if there's any questions?
Why not have both, Ken?
Like a taco ad.
So we've got the poll in progress there. The question is, which of the following is not one of the 3 infrastructure strategies for pedestrian safety? Is it prevention, segregation, separation, or integration? So for anyone who can't see the poll pop up on your screen, just type in, is it prevention, segregation, separation, or integration? And the question was, which of the following is not one of the 3 infrastructure strategies for pedestrian safety? But we had an earlier question come in, so whilst people are doing that, everyone's almost done, is which state has those push buttons? I'm not sure, Simone, if you meant the horse ones.
Oh yeah, the Pegasus crossings. Multiple states have those. There's certainly lots in Victoria. I think back while I was working at Vic Roads, somebody, we were reporting on that. It was some astounding number, like 52 of those or something springs to mind across Victoria, and certainly down around Flemington Racecourse and around these other areas. I think they're in New South Wales as well. I recall one out of where those horses are in the middle of the city near the cricket stadium and the like there. Tasmania's got one at least. So there are ones I know off the top of my head. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. We've got the results in, and I think this is a first, Ken. We have 100% spot on.
Yeah, that's made me quite happy. People are listening and they're answering correctly there. So well done. Yes. So prevention. Yeah. No, not one of these strategies. We're not trying to prevent pedestrians, and we're trying to prevent crashes. That would be lovely, and we do that through the strategy of either segregation, separation, or integration as a simple strategic technique, and then obviously lots of those details that we've been covering off. So that's good. Thanks for that one, Kathy. I think that is all the slides I wanted to get through today, and now just giving the opportunity for anybody to ask questions, make comments. Otherwise, we'll end a little early and get ready for you to come back next week for the next module where you're going to go through it and get an assignment. So I'm okay to let you out a little bit early today because you'll have a little bit of homework to do next time after we meet. But you are going to have a quiz that you have to complete after this session with more of those types of pedestrian questions. So hopefully you all get continue with your 100% there. And it's all good. So we've got another question that's come in here in the Q&A, haven't we? Is there a legal obligation for a road safety auditor to highlight potential safety concerns we see on the road in day-to-day life? What a good question. So, Adrian, there is no legal obligation, but there is a moral obligation. You will be armed with knowledge and a certain view of the world, and I always encourage a road safety auditor to step up and take on that responsibility and highlight and point out some of these higher risk ones. You know, the challenge is we sometimes used to do this in a 5-day road safety course that I used to run, which I'm not running at the moment, but which was to simply go out to whatever bit of road we had in front of the venue we were running it, and do sort of a 200-meter stretch and list all the road safety deficiencies. And you just list huge amounts every time you're looking at it. So I dare say, as you drive around the network, picking the high risk ones and alerting road authorities to those is pretty important. And what I do like, and I love to get this feedback from anybody who, once you're sort of through this course, is to understand how you see the road network differently and you see risk. I love getting that feedback of, Ken, I can't drive around anymore without seeing unprotected roadside hazards, or I can't drive around anymore without seeing pedestrian desire line deficiencies. Just go, that's magnificent. That's exactly what we want. So you'll be on the lookout always, and those high risk ones certainly. Fun fact: pedestrian push buttons are also tactile. Very good. Thank you. Yes, tactile meaning, I suppose, can feel, and then audio tactile as well. Excellent. Okay, it looks like I think we've covered most things off there, have we? Oh, what regulations, if any, defines when you have to conduct a road safety audit? Excellent question there from somebody. And interesting point for others. You can remain anonymous with your questions if you'd like under the Q&A. So we can't at all see who actually wrote that question, but what a wonderful question. And it is jurisdictional dependent, and it is often in jurisdictional policy. There is no jurisdiction that I'm aware of that has a legal requirement. So it is organisational policy, and that's what the courts will look at. They will, when there is an incident, they will say who is the road authority managing this road, and what is their policy around independent checks and road safety audits and when they should be done. So most jurisdictions have a policy which will state a dollar value or a risk assessment level to determine how many audits and when they're done. Some of them are fairly clean cut in terms of total estimated cost of project equals road safety audits at these stages, or above $5 million road safety audits at every single stage. Local governments will often default to a state policy, but really I encourage local governments to have their own road safety audit policy. And to make that easier, in the last update of the Austra's Guide to Road Safety Part 6, we decided to put in a sample road safety audit policy at the back and say to local government, it's in there, hey, just get this and change the title of, put your title in there, make sure you're comfortable with it all, and get that ratified as policy. The reason I say that is because if it's haphazard or random when the council decides they'll do a road safety audit and they won't, the courts are not going to look favourably on that if an incident happens. I go, well, why did you do a road safety audit on that one and you didn't do it on that one? And it's sort of, we want to see that clean, clear process based on some risk techniques. The courts will be much more reasonable in understanding that it wasn't done if there was some risk rating and some documentation of these types of projects were deemed low risk, and so road safety audits are not undertaken on them. These types of projects are higher risk, and we do road safety audits on these. They'll understand that. They don't expect a council to have unlimited funds and unlimited ability to do this stuff, but they want a process with some solid risk management thinking in there. And then developer funded stuff I'll talk about in Module 6 and the requirements on developers and the like. The spoiler alert for Module 6, it's the road authority's responsibility to dictate when these things happen with developments that access onto the public road network, or if it's going to become public down the track. Anything else popped in there, Kathy?
No.
All right. Well, we've had a good session there discussing the 8 steps of road safety auditing, the steps you take in any road safety audit. We've delved into pedestrians. Next week, we're going to get into the technical design and also some discussion around heavy vehicles, larger vehicles, massive vehicles, and how we think about those within road safety auditing. We're going to have the temporary traffic management stuff, and then I'll get you ready for your desktop assignment. And yeah, so we'll see you in the next module, which is next week. Anything else, Kathy?
If you're having any trouble with your quiz in Schoology, so if you go through and answer all your questions and then for some reason it shows up 0 out of the score, whatever it is, don't be alarmed. Schoology seems to be having some downtime issues today. So do your quiz and then we'll give it a little while, and then it seems to pop up a little bit later on. So just as an FYI.
Or you got wrong and you got 0 out of 10.
No, not this group, Ken.
No, they should be fairly easy based on the information you got in today's session. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Friday and weekend, and we'll see you next week for another exciting session.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.